Good morning and welcome to the Fall Coffee with the College Office for 9th and 10th grade parents and guardians. We do this program typically every fall and spring, or some semblance of this program, because we believe that it makes sense to work with both students and families on a developmental basis to help you understand a little bit about the college process before you actually launch into it. Before I go further, let me introduce myself. I'm Carolyn Middleton. If you don't already receive many emails from me, you will receive many from me as the years go on. I am Director of College Counseling, and with me today are three of my colleagues, or my three colleagues: Luis Almonte, Associate Director of College Counseling; Joelle Chen, also Associate Director of College Counseling; and Mary Dunn, who is our operations manager, and together we are the college office team. So today we are excited to talk to you a little bit about the college process, and we developed an agenda based upon what folks have written down in the spreadsheet, in the form that we asked for you to fill out. So most of you asked for an overview of the process. Some of you were wondering if it was a little too early to get started, and I think others were wondering if it was too late to get started. Nothing is late. And again, we try and do this developmentally to make sure that you're ready for the questions that might come up from your student, but also we've begun to talk with your students as well. We actually just had a program with 9th graders the other day that we'll mention a little bit as we go through this, and we'll begin doing some takeovers of the grade meetings with sophomores in the next couple of months in the spring semester anyway. So we'll go through that overview of the process. I know you all want to know about the application process and kind of get a sense of how colleges view the transcripts and what's important in the application overall. Standardized testing is always a big question, so we're going to talk to you a little bit about the practice tests that we offer to sophomores, and then standardized testing in general. We'll talk about activities and planning for summers. Many of you probably have seen that summer guide, summer and year-round enrichment guide that we send out. So we'll talk a little bit about that. We'll touch base on artists and athletes and international education, but we'll also share with you after this program some of the joint programming dates and program dates overall that we have scheduled throughout the year that you'll be able to take advantage of to have a more in-depth view of these particular categories. And then, since some of you may be ready to get out there and visit some campuses, we wanted to talk to you about visiting. And then finally, I'll show you one of the resource pages that we utilize for students, for families, and for ourselves, actually, as well, so that we have materials at our fingertips. So without further ado, I'm going to step forward into our first slide, our first meaty slide here. And I say it's meaty because it's filled with information. I broke the first rule of PowerPoint slides, which is not to put too much on that slide overall. But we wanted to give you a sense of what the expectations are, what the guidelines, the timeline is for what 9th graders are typically experiencing during that first year. And then we're actually going to talk a little bit about how parents and guardians can help support, because we figured that was a good framework to give you. As I mentioned I mentioned the other day, we had a meeting with the 9th graders where we talked to them about being students and being good students and learning how to manage their time, learning how to make sure that they're developing all the skills that they need to be developing as students, because it's primarily what they're doing in the 9th grade overall. But we showed them a full transcript, and we showed them a sample of an activities list from an actual college application, because we wanted them to see what it looked like moving forward without scaring them too much about the process. And they were pretty intent and pretty interested in what we were saying. Well, at least we hope they were. So we're hoping that they brought some of that home to you, but knowing how sometimes teenagers don't like to share these things with their parents and guardians, we want to give you a sense of some of the things that we talked to. So overview of the process of 9th graders. One of the points that we wanted to make with the 9th graders is that it is time for them to be able to develop those skills right now. And as family members, as parents, I mean, we help them do certain things in school as their advisors, as their teachers, as their deans, as their college counselors, even if we're interacting with ninth graders. But you all have the ability to guide them, and knowing the resources that are available. Actually, you are the primary guide that they have, but knowing the resources that are available to them is probably the most important tool that you can walk away from this experience with. So in terms of developing those skills, every senior, when we talk to them as we're interviewing them to write their letters of recommendation, every senior is able to talk about their growth and what they experienced since the ninth grade. It's about their personal growth, but it's also about their academic growth. So much of what they talk about is really that time management and figuring out how to be a student in the classroom. As parents, you can help to guide them, parents and guardians, you can help to guide them to use their free periods or their study hall time frame to complete their daily homework. This is especially something that's important for athletes who have a pretty busy afternoon and after school time, where they may be traveling for a game, they may be having practices in the morning or in the afternoon, and they need to be able to think about how to build in some of their homework during the day so that they're not finding themselves after dinner trying to complete the 3 hours or so of homework that they might be experiencing, or maybe it's less than that, of homework that they're experiencing from their regular classroom experiences. The other point that we made with them very quickly within that seminar was that grades do matter, that the grades that they got in that quarter report, they matter because they are able to build upon those grades, right? So ninth grade does appear on the transcript. Ninth grade, unless you're applying to some of the schools in Canada, ninth grade's going to count on that transcript, especially for US schools. So those grades matter, but what appears on the transcript, we made it clear to the ninth graders, is that it's a year-end grade. So that upward trend and that upward growth is really important. So by reinforcing that, you can help students see that if they're disappointed in something that they earned in their first quarter, they have the ability to build upon that for the second quarter, more so the ability to build upon that for third and for fourth quarter, and obviously that final grade, which is what will appear on the transcript. And Lewis, in a moment, Mr. Almonte will talk about the 10th graders overall and how that might be a little bit different on their transcripts. Students are learning at this point to ask questions, to talk to teachers. Finding their voice is something that's really important. So inside and outside of school, it's also important for students to have a sense of why they need to do that and the steps that they might take in order to do that. So adults in their lives can share with them times when they felt like they didn't know what to say, and the skills and tools that they took to build their confidence and also build their voice in the classroom. I shared with them that when I was a high school student, I was rarely the one that raised her hand. I didn't feel that confident. But one of the things that one of my mentors taught me is that if you get your voice out there a little bit earlier, then you're more likely to hear yourself talking. Conversations get built around some of the things that you might say, and you feel more inclined to work that muscle. So we think that's a really important factor for you to help us to understand. If there's homework planning that you can help with, maybe it's having a big calendar for big events. Maybe it's the to-do lists that students need to begin. Again, it's a muscle that they develop in order to begin to think about how to build that to-do list, and even having a physical planner. We're all big fans of having something physical to write something down. And then the activities that they join. One of the points that we made with students is the activities, things that they do during the summer, things that they do during school as co-curriculars or after school, their athletics or other commitments that they have. These are all things that can be part of that activities list. And it doesn't have to be something that is looking good for college. Rather, what we tried to reinforce is that it should be genuine and authentic. So the summer guide should be a resource for what options might be out there. But it's the authenticity and it's that genuine interest in terms of what students get more deeply involved in, how they really begin to sort of source that interest overall. That's what we're trying to to send home with them as their thought process for what they might be doing during this summer, a future summer. And we reassured them that it's fine to be able to continue in ninth grade, to continue to go to camp or do their CIT or get a part-time job. It doesn't have to be a fancy program that they're doing in order to satisfy what a college is expectations for that activities grid. And then finally, you'll hear more about this soon from the upper school office. There is a curriculum night for each grade, and Ms. Moore and all the department chairs will share information about course selection. And on the parent support side, remembering that college shouldn't be the all-consuming thing. Hopefully your language doesn't include what you're doing for college, but is all about the student enrichment, the learning more about what they're interested in. And with that, hopefully I didn't take too long on that first slide. I'm going to I'm going to move along and ask my colleague, Mr. Almonte, to jump in with this next slide.
Caroline, I can't turn on my camera.
Oh, you can't? Mary, can you help with that? There, I think I might have fixed it, Louis.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
Good morning, everyone. So I'm here to give you the overview of 10th grade. So 10th grade is really where students, I would say, kind of have a really big chance to develop and have a lot of choice, especially in the things that they're involved with and the things that they're learning. So 10th grade is the introduction to English and history electives. So students have more control over the classes that they're going to be enrolling in, what they're going to be learning, how they're going to be learning. And we like to say that this is twofold. It's for them to find a good match for a class, to find something that aligns with their learning style, as well as explore different subjects that ultimately in the long run could help guide them in terms of what it is that they want to do if it's in the humanities. And then later on, they'll have more control over electives in science and STEM. So, here at school, the students will work closely with their dean, as well as with their advisors to, review curriculum, figure out what might be a good fit for them. But what we encourage parents to do is to attend curriculum night, and really have open conversations about the classes that your students are interested in, the type of learning style that they might have, in terms of content, to really make sure that they're getting a good fit. Ideally, we want students to explore different things, and in a perfect world, they'd be exploring and maintaining really strong grades. So we really want you all to have a comprehensive conversation with them regarding what it is that they're thinking of taking. 10th grade is also a year where students should continue to stay involved. Typically, ninth and 10th grade is students are exploring and figuring out what it is that they want to do, trying new things. And then by 11th and 12th grade, they're kind of leading into these leadership positions and sticking with activities and initiatives that they're really passionate about. So thinking about, why and the things that they want to be involved with and why that's important for them, that's also a really great opportunity for students to try new things, to figure out what it is that they're passionate about, which ultimately also could help them figure out what it is that they might be interested in studying in the future, or initiatives that they might be willing to get involved with that might be just completely extracurricular. So here at school, I think Berkeley Carroll is very blessed that students are able to be involved with a majority of things throughout the school day, whether that's affinity groups or co-curriculars. We definitely recommend that our students stay with those at least, until for all 4 years ideally, because it's two really easy things that they can just do that are embedded within their day that doesn't deviate from their schedule. But then we also encourage students to get involved with athletics, with arts, with things in school, with things out of school, theater productions, things of that nature. So we definitely encourage you all to have conversations about what it is that your students really like to do. If there are new things that they want to try, maybe they want to try a engineering summer program, or maybe they're interested in wanting to get involved in the school musical, and get involved in a performance, and it's something that they've never done before. So we definitely encourage that exploration in ninth and 10th grade. And like I said, 11th and 12th grade, things are a bit more solidified, and then students are staying involved and taking up those leadership positions. Uh, In 10th grade, that's where we're introducing the practice SAT and ACT. So standardized testing will be introduced in 10th grade. So we basically have a conversation. Students will take two practice exams to get a baseline score. And there's nothing that a student has to do to prepare for that. We basically want to see how they're doing with the two exams without any test prep. So I'm going to go into this a little bit later in more detail and at a later slide. But we encourage you all to ensure that students take both exams. There's many a times where students have only taken one exam, and without taking the second exam, we don't know if they would have done better on the SAT or the ACT. And in terms of when they take the practice SAT and ACT, they take it at home. So we encourage you all to work with your student to prepare a comfortable space and schedule quiet time for your student to take the full length practice tests in the comfort of your own home. Um, Once you get the results from your practice exam, students can strategize test prep based on results, prepare self-study, online tools, classes, or tutoring. Typically, I would say this is happening in 11th grade, but the conversation about what they're planning to do in 11th grade happens at the end of 10th grade. So what this requires is having reviewing results and having a conversation with your student. We partner with an organization called Compass Education, and they provide a consultation that you can discuss your scores, discuss how the student felt taking the exams, and then basically pick a strategy. Students will either take a class in terms of test prep or they'll do one-on-one tutoring. And like I said, that usually happens in 11th grade. It's very rare that we have students start that at the end of 10th grade. Um, it's more generally, I would say, generally a thing that students are doing that in 11th. And then finally, the college office is going to take over 3 grade meetings in the spring semester of 10th grade. And basically, we're kind of introducing these college topics without being too kind of direct. It's more getting students to explore different things, start talking about college, start introducing different topics. So we take over 3 grade meetings. We do really fun activities that are pretty interactive. So what we encourage you all to do is to mark the events on your calendar, and then once your student has completed that, discuss how the activity went, discuss the content that happened with on the topics that they were learning about. Um, Things of that nature. So there's one that we do, which is the college dating game, which is just one example. So we'll have a bunch of different kind of descriptions of colleges to see kind of without the name being shown to see which ones students are kind of gravitating towards. So they're pretty unique programs, and I would say that they're really great conversation starters once the student has completed them. That your student might be coming home a little bit more curious or having a bit more questions. So we encourage you all to have conversations with them regarding that programming.
Thank you, Lewis. Good morning, everyone. So I know junior year is a year or two away from many of our families here, but we wanted to chat a little bit about what happens at the second half of high school. So thinking through junior year a little bit, we really start off that year with a junior college night, which is for students and their parents or guardians to attend. It's usually in early fall in the evening, and it's a great opportunity to talk through the year in depth. We're also going to encourage students to really solidify their testing plan. So as Mr. Amante mentioned, we will talk a little bit more about thinking through testing, how we prepare students through testing. But junior year, students will have the opportunity to take the PSAT, which is the practice SAT. It's different from the practice SAT that's offered in sophomore year. It is an official exam. It is a qualifying exam for certain national merit scholarships. It is not required. It is an optional programming piece, but a really great way to get a sense of where students are as they progress in test prep or start to really consider finalizing what their testing plan will look like when they will be taking that testing. We assign college counselors in the winter. So juniors right now just found out who they're assigned, though all of us work very closely together to support our students. And we are starting to have individual meetings with students. So we meet first with the juniors and then we meet together as a family to chat through how this process is going to go, introduce ourselves a little bit, and share some initial colleges that we think could be a really great match for the student. So that research process really begins junior year. Lewis and Carolyn actually just led a session yesterday for our juniors. I wasn't able to attend to talk about research and how to be effective in researching colleges. So we continue to have takeovers of grade meetings throughout junior and senior senior year to help guide students. During spring break and the holidays is a really great time to start visiting colleges. We'll talk more about college visits later in this session, but just to start thinking of using those long weekends, those extended breaks to visit colleges that might not be super accessible on a day-to-day basis. We have this great event at the beginning of May with other Brooklyn and Staten Island independent schools where we have a college fair, usually over 100 schools that are coming from across the nation and internationally, and it is only for students at these schools that we partner with. So it's a really intimate space. It's an opportunity for students to get to learn more about some of the colleges that have been recommended to them or colleges that they're interested in learning more about. This is also a great moment to mark off that date. You know, at the junior college night, we share with families important dates and deadlines for juniors. We'll share that date with you all when it comes to. But this event is a great time to check in again with students of how is that college list coming together? What are some schools that are standing out, or what are some schools that after some research you're like, not a fit for me? And then at the end of junior year, we have essay writing workshops that we host. It's usually almost a day-long workshop to help students prepare for the unique writing that is required of college applications. So we talk them through how to write. We do some practice together. So it's a really great kickoff into senior year. Senior year, the summer before senior year in particular, students really should be working through college application essays, preparing as much as possible. You know, as Ms. Middleton mentioned, we really try to schedule this developmentally, and we also encourage students to take advantage of any free times that they might have. We know their summers might be busy, so for some students, they're relaxing in the summer. Some students, they have 3, 4, 5 camps and programs that they're doing. But in those free times to help prepare, get writing done, visit colleges, try to get as much accomplished over the summer. We're available during most of the summer as well to meet with students, but it really helps make senior year, which is very exciting, but also very busy, as easy as possible. So throughout senior year, we're meeting with students. I'm sure a couple of us have meetings with students right after this one to help them go through the application, read over essays, really help support them, which Carolyn will talk a little bit more about and how we support them in this process. We really want to ensure that there is a culture of collaboration when working with students and their families. So really encouraging you all when it gets to this point and the students to reach out with questions to make sure that there is that open communication so that we can best support them in creating a timeline that works for them and following up on deadlines and making sure that at the end of this process, it's been an exciting one, maybe some moments of stress, but it's also been one that ends with a variety of options for the students. In senior year, of course, they start applying to colleges. A lot of early deadlines are in November. So again, the timeline can be quite quick depending on if a student is applying early. Regular decision deadlines typically are in January, but that early planning is so essential. We just told our seniors right now, they have until Friday to get us application materials for regular schools because we want them to enjoy the break. We want to enjoy the break as well, but we do set deadlines to make sure that this process is seamless and that we're able to carefully review and support all of the students. And then in the spring, we start to hear back from schools. There is a universal reply deadline of May 1st. That's for the US schools in particular. So for majority of students, they will have decided before or by May 1st what school they're attending. It's a very exciting time. And that is confirming the enrollment, submitting the deposit. And like I said, that might be earlier. Everyone has their own timeline for this process. Some students are done in October. Some students, it's going to May 1st. So every student's going to look different, but we're here to support. So I'm going to actually pass this along to Carolyn now to talk a little bit about the application and how we really support students.
And I'm back. Let's see. What I wanted to be able to talk about on this slide, a lot of folks had asked about what Berkeley Carroll will do to help support students and families, and I wanted to show you both, give you both a sense of what the application itself consists of, and then how we help students and families go through the process. You can see on the left-hand side, what does it consist of? A whole bunch of things. The application is going to include the transcript and the counselor letter. The transcript, as we mentioned previously, includes final grades. So final grades from year-long courses, final grades from those courses that are only semester-long courses. And then, of course, for seniors, once they've completed their first quarter or first semester, those grades, even though they're not final grades, those grades might actually be really important for colleges. So talking to students about upward trends and being able to finish well, those are all important messages for us to be able to give to students. In junior year, in the second semester, usually around May, we have students choose their teachers who will write letters of recommendation on their behalf. And we work with them to make sure that they're making selections that make sense to the colleges, make sense in terms of their skills and potentially the programs that they're applying to. We're going to talk a little bit more about activities and involvement in standardized testing in some future slides during today's program, so I'm not going to talk much about those, but note that part of our talk about standardized testing with families includes the fact that over 2,000 colleges right now are still testing optional. So when it comes to the question of standardized testing, when we're talking about 2,400 colleges across the US, knowing that about 2,000 of them are still testing optional, some may require testing again, but there's going to be a whole slew of them that would not require testing from an individual candidate. Interviews, interest, and fit. This is all part of students figuring out whether an institution is the right fit for them, and about institutions figuring out whether the student is going to be a good fit. So taking advantage of opportunities to do interviews, to demonstrate interest. This is part of what we talk with students about. Demonstrating interest will can include everything from visiting a campus in person to virtual visits to attending events here in New York City, meeting with a representative at that college fair that Louis mentioned. So a whole variety of different ways that students are able to demonstrate that interest. And fit is about the research. So that program that we mentioned we did with juniors yesterday, it really starts with delving into that research, learning more about schools, signing up on their mailing lists, and developing that relationship. Of course, there's some programs for your students that are very interested in the arts. There's some programs that will rely heavily on auditions and portfolios. And the specialized departments within Berkeley Carroll are incredibly, incredibly helpful in helping students to develop their audition materials, their portfolio materials, so that those can be submitted on time with students' best efforts and with the advice of experts in the field. And then certainly, the application process will include financial aid and scholarships. For some, you're looking for merit scholarships to assist in payment. For others who are receiving financial aid and who hope to receive financial aid in college, we'll talk a little bit about this later on, but we have a relationship that we've developed with College Money Method, an organization that does 6 workshops for us. Those 6 workshops include a couple that are devoted, a few that are devoted to 11th and 12th graders, but we've actually got programs that are focused on what 9th grade parents and guardians need to know and what 10th grade parents and guardians need to know. So a little bit on what BC does to help students. In our initial meetings with juniors and junior families, we're helping you to create a preliminary list. We actually develop a list of about 30 colleges initially based upon student interest and criteria and the student's profile to give them opportunities to find places that might be a bit of a reach for them, places that might be a good match, meaning they have kind of a 50-50 shot and 50-50 possibility of getting in, and then places that we might call foundations. Other schools you might hear talk about these foundations using the word safety, and we actually stay away from that word because safety implies that you're going to just slap something on at the end to be safe just in case, where the language of foundation means that you're building a list that's going to really strengthen the entire list overall. So students in their final college list should be happy with the whole list. In addition to those teacher recommendations, the counselor actually writes a comprehensive letter of recommendation. All of the materials that we have at our fingertips include our anecdotals from teachers. They include an interview that we do with the students, all of the student records, and our conversations with the students and their families. So we're able to write a real great narrative that helps us describe the student's pathway through the academic experience. I mentioned a little bit about teachers and letter writing. Ms. Chen talked a little bit about the essay workshops. We help them from A to Z on those essays and supplements, brainstorming ideas all the way through the final editing process. We do mock interviews with students to make sure that they're putting their best foot forward. And we support students in completing all sorts of different kinds of applications. The common application is the one that our students most commonly use, and it's utilized by about 1,000 colleges today. So if you use that way back when you applied to college, if you applied, or if you're older, older kids may have used that application. It's still around, serving more colleges than ever, including some international colleges. The UCAS is an application that's used by the universities in the United Kingdom. And then there's other applications that we work through with students as well. We're also students advocates. We help to make sure that they are taking the right steps, everything from helping them to construct that email to a college representative to just making sure that they're checking their portals and that all of their information is correct, to that final decision-making process. So with that, I'm going to switch over to this next slide and talk a little bit about how colleges view Berkeley Carroll transcripts. Louis, Joelle, and I all have backgrounds in working in college admissions and having that university experience in reviewing applications. And what you'll hear when you go to colleges and you start attending information sessions, the two words that you'll most often hear when colleges talk about their review of applications is they talk about context and they talk about a holistic review. Most of those 2,400 colleges and universities practice what's called holistic review, meaning they're taking every piece and part into account. So whether it is looking at the transcript and the context of that transcript and understanding the curriculum that's offered and understanding what a student has access to the context of a student's story and how that story may have affected the steps that they've taken and the choices that they've made. Context and holistic are typically things that you hear from colleges all over the US especially, but also outside of the US. We've developed a school profile. In fact, every high school has something that's called a school profile. It's a document that helps colleges understanding of our curriculum. So when folks are looking at Berkeley Carroll for their high school experience, or they're just beginning this process, they wonder often about what they might hear as important advanced placement or IB curriculum. There's all sorts of ways that high schools will have advanced curriculum mentioned and advanced curriculum defined within their own context. At Berkeley Carroll, we divested from the AP program back in 2011 in favor of having classes that are able to go a little bit more in depth with particular subject matter, and we're able to actually do more hands-on work than if we followed an AP curriculum. For the colleges, there's really no difference that they experience between what a high school may be talking about in terms of their AT, their AP, their IB. What they're looking at is the student in the context of the curriculum that is offered by their high school. And you can see a copy of this school profile. It's actually on our website. It's available for anyone to be able to look at. And in a few moments, I'm going to show you a resource that will show you even more information and also has a link to the school profile. Colleges will also care about that rigor in context. So again, that word context is in there. Colleges aren't expecting every student to take the most advanced courses starting at day one. In fact, at Berkeley Carroll, they can't access more advanced courses in some of their subjects until the junior year. And colleges definitely understand that. They want rigor to be appropriate. So if a student jumps into all advanced courses and they're not ready for that, we don't want them to experience that because we don't want them to do poorly in those subjects. We want to make sure that they have a balanced curriculum. And Joelle, Louis, and I actually join with the deans in advising students as they're making selection of courses as they enter the 10th grade, the 11th grade, and the 12th grade. Which grades count? As we mentioned before, it's those year end or semester end grades for semester courses. So they all count. And if we're looking at schools outside the US, that may have a varying response. It could be Canada, which traditionally will look mostly at 11th and 12th grade with some attention to the 10th in some provinces. And if we're looking at the UK, they care about the US transcript overall, and may favor some advanced courses in a way that's a little bit different. What's important is setting a course for 4 years. And so in thinking about what a student might choose for 11th grade, in our consultations and our conversations with students, we're always talking with them in those 2-year timeframes. So what they pick in junior year, in addition to advanced American studies, they have some options where they can choose courses in science and math and language and in the arts. We want to make sure that they're thinking through what might happen the next year, the year after that. And you also will have some insight into that in the curriculum nights if you haven't already experienced those. And then for students who are doing a semester program or a year abroad, those have some complications about picking courses. If they're starting in a fall term and they're jumping into a semester program for a spring term, but easily advised and easily settled questions that they might have. For the year abroad, they'll be taking a curriculum. If they're doing SYA, they're taking that SYA curriculum, which fits nicely with the Berkeley Carroll curriculum. Both experiences, though, we think really give incredible opportunities for students to have an experience outside of the Berkeley Carroll experience. And it's their growth is really tremendous. And it's exciting to see when they come back to Berkeley Carroll and they're starting to write these supplemental essays or their essays overall, how they reflect on their experience and how it's changed, sometimes really changed their trajectory overall. So with that, I'm going to turn the program back over to Mr. Almonte. Let me make sure that I can turn on the video for him and turn my own off. Let's see. Sorry, Lewis, just give me 1 second here.
I'm on.
Oh, you got it? Great. Thank you.
Perfect. So just revisiting the practice SAT and practice ACT, and then talking about the PSAT and preparing for the SAT and the SAT and the ACT. In 10th grade, like I said, Berkeley Carroll basically purchases the opportunity for students to take a practice SAT and a practice ACT through Compass Education. And like I said earlier, these practice exams are to give students a baseline score to understand two things. One, which one did they perform better on? And then two, which one felt more comfortable to them in terms of content as well as timing of the test. So the SAT and the ACT are very different exams. The SAT is 2 sections. It's evidence-based reading and writing as well as math. The ACT is English, reading, math, science. So I would say in terms of testing, it doesn't make sense for students to pursue completing both just because they are wildly different tests. And we do see that students are able to be more successful and maximize their score if they stick to the exam that they've done better on, they feel more comfortable with, and they put all their eggs in that basket. So, like I said, we partner with Compass Education. We provide students the opportunity to take their practice SAT and ACT in the spring. I believe it's February and early April. But correct me if I'm wrong, Carolyn. And then basically at that point, students will receive their scores for both. They'll be able to basically see how they did on both exams, and then they'll be able to have a consultation with a expert at Compass Education that can talk through, how the exam felt, the content, how they felt in terms of timing. I would say it's usually pretty clear which exam the student is doing better on in terms of score, but there are some exams where students basically the SAT and the ACT, the converted score are pretty similar. So then it comes down to the student and the family making a judgment call in terms of which exam that they want to complete. So if that ends up being the case, typically what we recommend is that they go with the one that feels more comfortable in terms of content and timing. Um, So yeah, and basically, once those are completed and you'll have your consultation, we also have a spring event for the 10th graders where Compass Education and Adam Ingersoll from Compass Education will come to talk about kind of do a very in-depth overview of standardized testing, preparing for standardized testing, any changes in the landscape, things of that nature. So I would say post-COVID, we saw a lot of colleges and universities go test optional because it was just very difficult for students to access testing sites, locations were being canceled, things of that nature. And then since COVID, majority of schools have decided to remain test optional. A lot of colleges and university are gathering a bunch of data to see if it makes sense to return to testing or if they're still able to solidify a very strong class without testing or without providing the opportunity to apply test optional. We have been seeing some colleges and universities begin to reinstate testing. However, it's not at all the majority. So some IVs have begun to reinstate testing. MIT, some Florida State schools, Purdue, but the majority of colleges and universities still are test optional. However, there are some schools who have been saying that they're going to reinstate, as well as there are some schools that have been reassessing year by year. So it's not guaranteed that a school that your student might be interested in, or it's not guaranteed that a school that your student might be interested in might not return to testing by the time that they apply. Um, and we have been seeing a lot of colleges and universities recommend that students send testing. So in terms of what we recommend that every student prepares for the SAT and ACT, take the practice exams, figure out which exam they want to complete, and then stick to that exam, complete standardized test prep for that exam, whether that's through a class or through one-on-one tutoring, and that they at least take the exam twice. That way, at least they have a score that they can use if a school reinstates testing or if a school that they're really interested in requires testing. It's incredibly rare that a student doesn't do testing at all, but we have seen some students do that. If a student is in their junior year, going into their senior year, and they've basically gone through and confirmed that all their schools are remaining test optional, they don't have to do testing. However, um, if a student does have really strong testing, it's another piece of the pie that could aid them in being admitted to the college or school. If they don't send testing, then they're going to place weight on the rest of the student's application. So they'll put more weight on the transcript, they'll put more weight on the extracurricular activities, things of that nature. Um, and I would say, sorry, Carolyn, can you go back? In terms of the standardized testing as well, it's also very rare. There's some students who on their practice SATs and ACTs are scoring like incredibly low, which is, I would say, pretty normal for some students, that they're doing really well in the classroom, but they're just not the best test takers. If that ends up being a situation, even with test prep, sometimes it's very difficult to get that score up to a place where it's competitive. If that ends up being the case, case by case with those students, if they're comfortable and they don't want to pursue testing, we can craft their preliminary college list and recommend schools that are completely test optional. Because prior to the pandemic, there were a bunch of schools that were traditionally test optional. So that's basically what happens in 10th grade are those practice exams. In 11th grade, students will take the digital PSAT and the NMSQT. That'll be in October of junior year. So that's a practice SAT. The score that they receive for that practice SAT cannot be used to apply to college. However, it's just a practice exam. And then on top of that, it qualifies students for national merit and recognition programs. That's the only thing that the PSAT does. It also doesn't it is not required that a student needs to do test prep to prepare for the PSAT because, again, it's a practice exam. In terms of testing timeline, we just wanted to show you some popular timeframes. So if a student's doing early testing, typically they would figure everything out after their practice exams at the end of 10th grade, and then their summer going into junior year, they would complete test prep. And ideally, you would want to do test prep 3 to 4 months in advance leading up to the first targeted test date. So this timeline would be prepping over the summer to take the November or December SAT or the November December ACT. Then you would do kind of like a refresh. And then the second test you could do in the spring. I would say the most common timeline that we see is students completing test prep in the winter and then taking their first exam in March, the SAT in March or the ACT in April, and then taking the exam immediately after that, which would be the May SAT or the May or June ACT. So I would say these are the most common timelines that we see, with the traditional testing timeline being the most common that we see that students take advantage of. The traditional testing timeline, I think, is best just because 11th grade is a bit of a jump for students because they're starting American Studies. They might be taking more advanced level classes. So, to prep and then to lead up to take the exam at the end of the first semester can be a lot for some students. Versus when they're in the swing of things by the second semester of junior year, they kind of have a grasp of how they're navigating junior year, and then they can wrap up their testing by the end of the summer, and then for the summer and senior year they can just dedicate all their efforts to crafting the rest of their application.
All right. So we mentioned a little bit earlier, extracurriculars play a role in the application. And I believe it was Lewis who talked about how it's really important to start becoming engaged in ninth and 10th grade. So we wanted to talk a little bit about extracurriculars and utilizing summers, but really want to start off by acknowledging that there is not a magic list of extracurriculars or a particular program that is going to get a student into college. Colleges are looking for students who are engaged. What that engagement looks like is up to the student. So there's not one activity or one program that is the secret key or the secret answer to college. Sometimes I wish there was, that would make this process so easy, but it is an opportunity for students to start to explore what their passions are and to learn a little bit more about who they are. We chatted with the ninth graders this year to talk about, the importance of getting involved. And we really share with them that involvement starts at Berkeley Carroll and can spread from there. So thinking about what they're doing in the day to day, as Mr. Amante mentioned, students have the opportunity to explore co-curriculars and affinity spaces in their school day. It's not something they have to worry about after school while they're doing homework, while they're getting engaged in other things. So really taking the time, especially in ninth and 10th grade, to start getting involved in the spaces within Berkeley Carroll that excite them, so that by junior, senior year, they're able to take on leadership roles in those spaces. But also to use Berkeley Carroll to start to explore new interests or to really deepen long held interests that they have already. We have a lot of co-curriculars. Some co-curriculars change. Students propose co-curriculars every year. So using this as a starting point to start to figure out what is it that they like, what is it that they don't like as well. And then thinking, we live in New York City. That is an incredible privilege, the resources and the opportunities to get involved beyond Berkeley Carroll. So to really think of Berkeley Carroll as like the starting point, and to think about the city that we're in or the neighborhood that we're in within Brooklyn or Manhattan or Queens or Staten Island or the Bronx, to really expand those passions. So if you like, and we talked about this in the Kids Lab, if you love playing video games every day, I love that for you. But have you thought about game design programs that are offered at the colleges within the city, or some of the coding programs that are available for free online to take it that step further? Programs do not have to be costly or name brand to be impactful. We will share, and Miss Middleton has already shared a couple of times already, our school year and summer enrichment guide. It is a great resource to take advantage of. And within that resource, we have programs that are completely free, programs that are low cost, and programs that are a little bit more expensive. Colleges do not have more value on the more expensive activities. In fact, they're looking again at students who are engaged in some way or some form. And that engagement looks different, especially when it comes to leadership. There's so many ways to be a leader in your community. And not only in the Berkeley Carroll community, but the community you come from. Maybe it's within your religious community. You're very involved, in your church or mosque or synagogue. Maybe it's that you are taking care of your younger siblings or have significant family responsibilities where you help out with your grandparents or you help out with your parents. That's a level of leadership and engagement. Maybe you're an artist and you volunteer where you teach other people art, or maybe you work a part-time job at, Pliable. We have a lot of students that work there. That's also leadership. So we're thinking about fostering and nurturing that, over these 4 years of high school. It is not something that immediately starts in ninth grade where you become the leader or co-president or co-leader of all of these organizations, but we start to build, and that building starts with getting involved in ninth and 10th grade. Depth, I think, is really more important than breadth when thinking about extracurriculars. On the Common Application, which is what most of our students use, there's space for 10 activities. However, there are some colleges that say we're only going to focus on the first 5. One college in particular only allows for 5 activities. So it's not about volume and getting the most amount of activities, but really taking the time to deeply get engaged in a program, get engaged in a community, or get engaged in areas of interest for the students. The summer is another great opportunity beyond the school year to explore different opportunities that might not be accessible during the school year. So pre-colleges are really popular for our students. That's when a student goes to college and spends a summer there. Great experience can sometimes be a costly experience. So there are other ways to utilize your summer with volunteer work, with part-time jobs, with kind of internship opportunities. We had one student who interned at the Brooklyn Museum, and that was really exciting for him because it explored a whole new career opportunity and a new path that he's potentially getting ready to explore with college. So these are great opportunities to take advantage of and utilizing that summer opportunities guide as a starting point. We also want to talk a little bit about kind of some unique pathways in admissions that came up through some of the survey responses. So we wanted to briefly talk about athletic recruitment and know that that process can start a little bit early for some students, usually end of sophomore year for some of the more competitive sports like basketball. But students should really consider a couple of following. Assessment of skill. I know that can sometimes be a difficult thing, right? Especially as parents, as loved ones of these students, we see our students as stars, but really getting an objective viewpoint from coaches that might be at Berkeley Carroll, if they're in a club sport, if they're in a travel team, to really get a sense of, is my student's athletic ability going to prepare me for NCAA, where it gets down to a really, really small percentage of students who go from high school sports to college sports. So really having that honest conversation and knowing that athletic recruitment is not the end all be all for playing sports in college. Yes, there's varsity level. That's a significant commitment. And that's something else that we want students to think about. Is the commitment of travel, not only locally, but travel across the country, the significant amount of practices and team workouts, is that the commitment that I want to focus my time on in college? For some students, that is an adamant yes. For some students, they're not sure. So there's still intramural and club sport options that a student does not have to be recruited to play, but still is able to explore their passion for volleyball or explore tennis. I was a student athlete in high school. I played tennis. I loved tennis, but I first off, knew that my skill level was not at the place to be recruited, but I also didn't want that level of commitment. And I was still able to like bring my racket to college and go to the courts and play in club tennis. And that fulfilled my love for the sport. So thinking through that assessment and that commitment piece. It's also important to develop your skills. So obviously for athletes, they are consistently developing skills beyond the like primary season. So an off season training, but thinking about attending camps, competitions to really enhance their sports skills, but also to start to meet coaches. There are a lot of camps that begin at the end of sophomore year throughout junior year that are going to be local, but also are going to be travel camps, sometimes on a college campus. Great opportunity to visit and get to learn more about a school, but you really do want to start to build that development with skills, but also communicating with coaches. And it really is up to the students to start that initial contact with college coaches. The colleges want to hear from the students. They're not super interested in hearing from the parents. They know that this is a collaborative decision. They know that the parents should be involved and they're happy to answer those questions. But that initial outreach really should come from the student. And this is a great learning opportunity for the student to learn to advocate, to talk with people, to sometimes not necessarily hear the great news, but also to get excited about some good news and making decisions there if they are on the recruitment path. What school is going to be a good fit with me? What questions do I need to ask? We have a great athletic recruitment guide that we made in partnership with Ramel Hoffman, our director of athletics. And so we are happy to chat with families. But that guide that we've created is a really great starting point to think about the athletic recruitment process. Another question that we heard a lot was around international admissions. So every year we have students who are looking for colleges outside of the US. I think it gets more popular every year, whether that's Canada, United Kingdom, Europe, beyond. And those applications do look a little bit different from the US process. Usually they are more focused on the academics than the extracurriculars, than the writing piece. They really want to see that a student is academically prepared for the academic rigor of their institutions. So the transcript carries a significant amount of weight. As Ms. Middleton mentioned, for some schools, the 9th grade doesn't matter. Some schools, 10th grade is not as important either. But really, those last 2-3 years are really, really essential in the international piece, looking for strong grades, but also looking at that rigor, that they've challenged themselves academically, that they've taken advanced coursework. We often hear the question around APs. Do I need to take APs in order to go off to international universities? The larger answer is no, but there are some institutions, the most highly selective institutions, Cambridge, Oxford, London School of Economics, will require multiple AP exams with high marks. So for APs, they're graded on a scale of a 1 to 5, 5 at the highest. For schools like Cambridge and Oxford, they're looking for 4 exams with a 5 or high, or a 4 or 5 or higher. So these are really, really selective institutions. In a lot of cases, they're even more selective than our most selective institutions in the United States. We are offering AP exams. That is something that is considered on a case-by-case basis, but we really want students to focus instead on that examination on match, on fit, on understanding that there are hundreds of other additional schools in Canada, in the United Kingdom, in Ireland, and other parts of the United States that will consider our students without AP exams. Our students who have gone abroad have done so without AP examinations. So we do have a list of over 100 colleges across the world, and we are happy to help chat with students to prepare them to go off to these unique institutions and the unique application process attached to it, as Ms. Middleton mentioned. And so now I'm going to pass this along, I believe, to Lewis to talk a little bit about campus visits.
Just for the sake of time, I'm just going to do these pretty briefly. So in terms of campus visits, I think a lot of times families are asking, like, when should we start visiting colleges? When's a good time? Are we early? Are we behind? Are we behind? The reality is most college visits are happening in junior and senior year. That is the ideal time because that's when your student understands how the school fares in terms of category, in terms of likelihood of admission. They have a preliminary college list that has categorized those schools as either a reach, a middle, or a foundation. And they are more kind of clocked into their college process, gathering information, doing research to be able to apply in earnest. So I would say that's kind of prime time. However, 9th and 10th grade, I think, is a good opportunity for students to explore or just to see a college, to have those introductory conversations. We encourage families to explore all different types of schools, big and small, urban, suburban, rural, and really kind of take it from the stance of just generally, this is a college. Not necessarily in 9th or 10th grade saying like, hey, are you interested in going to this school? And I say that because there are times where, you might take a student to go and see a really selective place that they fall in love with. And then by the time they get into 11th or 12th grade, they realize it's going to be an incredible reach. And it's hard for them to fall in love with something else once they've seen something that they basically have kind of found a good fit with. So it's all about managing expectations, and in this process, we like for our students to be able to reach, but we always say that a really strong college list is one that has a strong foundation in the middle, and then encouraging our students to reach. So really kind of keeping an open mind, a general mind in terms of looking at different schools, taking your students to see a variety of different places, not just the big names or the most selective. Will keep kind of college in a general perspective for them that they can hone in on and get more specific in 11th and 12th grade. So what we recommend in 9th and 10th grade is, if you're traveling or if you have a day or two to just kind of stop by a college that's nearby, take a weekend tour, walk around a campus, things of that nature. More of in an informal setting, and then, like I said, things will become more formal in 11th and 12th grade. And then in our backyard, there are a majority of schools within an hour of New York City that students can see, which we think are really great. So there's SUNY Purchase, which is very much like a smaller remote campus, Barnard College, Pratt Institute, Fordham, Sarah Lawrence, CUNY, New York, NYU, which is a great example of an urban institution, Columbia University, which is a great example of a traditional college in a city, Bard College, which is a great liberal arts college that isn't too far from New York. So there's a variety of different places that you can take your student to just within New York City to let them understand the different types of institutions that exist and get them to start thinking of that general criteria.
And then our final slide for you is just a couple of the resources that we have available to families to be able to do some exploration. We have created a college counseling resource page that often we try to market and force and get families to use in the junior and senior year, but we want to make it available to 9th and 10th grade families as well. So I'm going to send you a link to the college counseling resource page. It's chock full of information. So that summer opportunities guide that you received, the athletic recruitment guide that we've mentioned earlier, all sorts of resources in terms of exploring colleges. We're going to make this available to you as a link in a follow-up email. Once we have the recording of today, we'll send it all out to you. And the College Money Method, I mentioned College Money Method a little bit earlier, specifically in terms of financial aid and educational financing. March 12th is a date to put on your calendar for an event that is targeted for 9th grade parents and guardians, and then a separate program right after that for 10th grade parents and guardians. And students are obviously, well, maybe not obviously, students are also welcome to attend these sessions. They're targeted specifically for families at the beginning of their exploration process. Paul Martin, who is the principal of College Money Method, is chock full of information. He can really help to unveil some of the mysteries of educational financing, some of the mysteries of financial aid, and we will provide a direct link to the College Money Method resource page as well, where Paul has posted videos, he has posted resource guides, he has posted a whole bunch of information about the financial aid process that we think might be useful for you and your family to explore. So with that, I think I'm hoping that we've answered some of the questions that you may have included. Colleagues, have there been questions? I can't see it, and since I'm running the webinar, I can't see if there's questions that have come up. Have we answered those questions? Is there anything additional that we need to talk about with families before we sign off?
I think
Anything
we've
additional that we haven't?
covered.
Excellent. And part of our goal with this is to help you plan for this kind of admissions funnel is the way we think about it. Plan for things staying as broad as possible. And then as you go through the process, we can narrow things down. So everything from planning for testing, even if you might not eventually, your student may not eventually submit testing, planning for the process overall, making sure that you're keeping an open mind, as my colleagues have mentioned multiple times. So we thank you for your time today. I hope that we haven't kept you from too much in your day-to-day life. And we will send this recording out within the next couple of days, along with those resources that I mentioned earlier. So thank you so much for your attention today. We really appreciate it. Take care now.